what I think has been one of the most exciting findings is that the dogs that have been on the combination therapy, Molly, they have pushed out sort of 5 to 7 months.
Welcome to Dog Cancer Answers, where we help you help your dog with cancer.
Hello, friend. Today on Dog Cancer Answers, we're taking a peek into the research and development side of dog cancer treatments. Dr. Kim Agnew is a veterinarian in Australia, and he's a consultant for the biotech company Repurposed, which is looking into a drug called Monepantel for canine cancer. It's not quite ready to hit the shelves of pharmacies near you, but the company is hoping it will be another tool in your veterinarian's toolkit very soon. Dr. Agnew, thank you for joining us.
It's very good, Molly. It's great to be here and looking forward to the chat.
So you work with a biotech company called Repurposed, and they are currently conducting some trials on a really interesting drug that's currently approved in your neck of the woods, but not yet in the U.S. Can you tell me a little bit about what you guys are doing down at Repurposed and what you're working with and what you see for the future?
Sure, yeah. So Monepantel is a really interesting chemistry because the initial product that was generated with Monepantel came from a large pharma company called Novartis, and they developed Monepantel from scratch as a sheep dewormer.
Okay.
And so when you see a trade name Zolvix, if you see that anywhere on the globe, it'll be used for treating sheep and cattle for getting rid of internal parasites. So one of the passions I have, Molly, really is trying to short circuit the whole product development train. Like, we all know how long this takes. And
yeah,
I think one of the fascinating things that Repurposed is trying to do, they're just looking at the different ways that chemistries can act within the body. And within the industry, we call it repurposing. So we have a chemistry like Monepantel, which is developed an innovative sense for deworming cattle. But hang on, we find that it actually has a lot of other effects as well, different systems within the body. These stories are not too uncommon when you look at the way some actives are discovered. But in this case, there was an academic physician who worked in the Sydney hospital, and he happened to have some sheep. Like, it's not uncommon for people in Australia to have some sheep if you live in the country, right?
Right.
And there were discussions in the literature about repurposing products that were used for a different purpose to try and ascertain what else they could do within the body, right? So, and anthelmintics or dewormers were one of these segments. So this particular physician had finished trenching a sheep. He looked at the bottle and saw, this has got Monepantel in it. Goes back to the lab and sets up this set of in vitro screens against various cancer cells. And hey presto, finds that Monepantel is effective against a wide range of in vitro cell lines. So that's kind of how...
Now, in vitro means in glass, which means in the petri dish in the lab, right? So there's
Correct.
a lot of things that happen in a petri dish that wouldn't necessarily happen in the body.
Yes.
But this is exciting to find something that works in a lot of cancers in the lab.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, it's a really good comment. But certainly this is the way that initial work starts.
Right.
Does it work or not? But yeah, your points are really good.
Okay, so he sees this great result, and he says, wow, the sheep dewormer is killing cancer cells.
Yes, so fundamentally the company was started, obviously there were discussions around intellectual property, but the company was started on this basis. And Repurposed is a listed company in Australia, a little bit unusual for small biotechs, but they are focused on both human and canine applications of Monepantel. So we obviously will be talking around the canine study today. But Repurposed as a company is also looking at Monepantel use in people, also for oncology, for cancer. And the other real fascinating area they're looking at is motor neuron disease, actually, for people, which is huge unmet need and really debilitating. So, yeah, it's got a lot of potential opportunities.
Say that again, a motor neuron disease.
Yeah, Lou Gehrig is one name for
Oh,
it.
Lou
But
Gehrig's
it's,
disease.
yeah,
Oh, wouldn't that be amazing?
it would be.
So what's the mechanism that you're looking at? And is it the same mechanism for a motor neuron disease like Lou Gehrig's and cancer? Or are they different things that it's doing?
Yes, look, we think that the end result, the end mechanism is the same, but maybe slightly different pathways. So in a dewormer, simply what it does, it blocks transmissions to muscles, right? So paralyzes the parasite.
Okay.
But within oncology and within the motor neuron mechanism, Monepantel's found to affect the whole energy flow system within the cell. And this is a really complex pathway. It's called the mTOR pathway. And it's got multiple feedback loops that control all sorts of aspects to it. But fundamentally, Molly, what happens is that, let's say the body were in a starvation condition, then what the system does is it starts to remove some of our cells to feed the body, right? So it manages, if you're in a flux of lots of energy, the system trucks away in the background. If you are getting hungry or you're starving, then it activates different systems. So it ends up actually killing some cells, right? So what happens in the cancer cell, which is rapidly growing and it's using lots of energy, what Monepantel does is that it slows this whole energy process down and starves the cell, right? So then the immune system comes in and actually removes the cell and degrades the cell. So this is the high-level view of how Monepantel works.
That's fascinating. I want to make sure I really understand this and that our listeners do too. So I'm thinking about like photographs of someone who's truly starving, right? And they're emaciated and you can see the flesh is really dissolved in their skin and bones. That's literally because something in the body, this energy system, has said, gosh, there's no food coming from the outside. I'm going to have to eat my own flesh in order to survive. So I will go and break down muscle and I'll go and break down other tissues, use them for energy to keep myself going in the hopes that food will start to come in from the external environment. Am I correct so far?
Yes, yes.
So this system that Monepantel is involved in slows that whole breakdown of tissues down. And so the cancer cells that are growing become like a target for the Monepantel. And they say, no, slow down. And so the tumor basically, in effect, goes into the starvation mode.
Yes. So there's a process called autophagy, which is the destruction of cells. So that's, in the end, that's what Monepantel induces within the body. And what's interesting is that...
That's almost as devious as cancer.
Yes. Yes.
You can use that.
Yes, that's right. Yeah.
Wow. So it really just starves that tumor of energy.
Yes.
So what does it look like in the body in these trials? Because you're now moved into trials, so you're conducting actual trials in real live bodies.
Yeah, so what we've done in canine study today, we're still quite early in the study, Molly, but we've enrolled 34 dogs now. And what Pharmost has been doing over this time, which has probably taken 18 months to 2 years to enroll these dogs. And we have sites in Australia. We've recently, just this year, set up a site in New Zealand, and we have one site in the US as well now.
Okay.
And over the last 2 years, really it's just been a case of looking at dose and making sure we can titrate the dose to the effect. And I think maybe one of the interesting things your listeners may appreciate understanding is that Monepantel is not a cytotoxic like a chemotherapy type program. But what this does is produce quite a different outcome within the dog. So it's still really clear that chemotherapy in dogs is still the gold standard for those owners who want to preserve their dog's life for as long as possible. And Monepantel will not replace chemotherapy in terms of duration of outcome.
Okay.
But because it's not a cytotoxic, then it produces less impacts on the body. So what you tend to see in the dogs that we've investigated so far is that those dogs that respond well to Monepantel, the lymphoma almost goes into a stasis, like it's managed. So the dog's quality of life actually is, in some cases, owners have said it's sort of back to how it was before they observed them getting ill. It doesn't cause the tumours to go into regression.
Okay.
But it allows the dog to manage their lymphoma effectively as they would normally. And the convenience of the administration that Pharmost has got is a daily tablet, right? So once the initial diagnosis is made, the tablets are prescribed, they go back, and the owner can then just freely medicate on a daily basis according to the instructions.
It's a cheap dewormer, so this is something that's safe to handle, I imagine, unlike many chemotherapy drugs, whether given as an injectable or at home in tablet form.
Yes, yeah, correct. And there's no need for hospitalization for intravenous strips or those sorts of things. So the outcomes tend to be an outcome of stasis, and also there's no need for owners or children not to be able to handle the dogs after chemo or some other medications. There obviously, for safety reasons, there are sometimes 3 days or 5 days where it's best not to touch secretions from the pet, right? So Monepantel doesn't create those levels of sort of handling challenges with your pet.
That's pretty incredible. So you mentioned lymphoma. Do all of the dogs in all of your different trial sites have lymphoma?
Yes, yeah. So the trial is specifically for treatment-naive B-cell lymphoma.
Okay.
So all our cases are treatment-naive B-cell lymphoma.
Meaning that they're not doing chemotherapy, treatment-naive, meaning nothing else has been done. They're only getting Monepantel.
Correct, yes. So there's quite a stringent enrollment criteria, as you can imagine, but the company really wanted to assess Monepantel. This is the first time Monepantel's obviously been assessed in dogs, so you want to make sure that there's no complications in terms of previous therapies or outcomes that might cloud the findings.
So these must all be owners who are declining chemotherapy to begin with, and then they're offered this. Is that how they get into the trials?
Yes, well, there's certainly, and it's quite an interesting question when you think around, same with people, like the reasons why people think about different mechanisms of managing cancer, say, what they do in themselves. And obviously with their pets, the choice has really been made on a couple of things. One is that chemotherapy itself is something that they are a bit concerned about. There's the time, sometimes it's the logistics, there's the costs, the outcomes and the side effects sometimes concern people. Mm-hmm. We've had owners who have had chemotherapy themselves and don't want to use that on their dogs. Some people hear about the study because there is a reasonable amount of media activity that Pharmost put out and testimonials on their website from owners who have been involved in the study. And so sometimes it's a curiosity, what is this new chemistry and can it help my dog and how does it fit? So sometimes there's just that scientific curiosity that owners want to explore as well.
Yeah, those are our listeners. A lot of them have sort of a natural scientific curiosity themselves, and they encounter a terrible diagnosis for their dog, and they become very knowledgeable about something they didn't want to become knowledgeable about, not just because it'll help their dog, but because they're naturally curious people.
Yes.
That's interesting. So why are you looking at lymphoma instead of some other illness, other cancer type? What was that decision-making process about?
Yeah, so look, I think decision was made a bit before my time with Pharmost, but the understanding I have is that there's a couple of key things. One is that lymphoma in dogs is obviously closely related to Hodgkin's in people.
Okay.
Right, so there's real similarities in sort of genetic causes. There's T and B cell makeup, the speed of progression. There's lots of similarities. And because Pharmost has a human arm as well, then the data generated from lymphoma in dogs certainly would help think about Hodgkin's in people. So there is that aspect. The other aspect really is that lymphoma is such a devastating disease for dog owners.
Yeah.
It's incredibly aggressive, and if it's not treated, then really once you find your dog has this diagnosis, it's months, if you're lucky, 1 to 2 months without any treatment.
If you're lucky.
If you're lucky.
Yeah. 3 to 4 weeks for many.
Yes. And so I think there was a mix of things, but again, if you think around developing data for a new oncology product, then something like lymphoma is a challenging one because it is so aggressive, as you say, Molly. But the speed of progression actually lets you assess the chemistry quite quickly because you know within 1 to 2 months whether this is going to work or not, right? So there is that aspect as well.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah, quickly. I guess you started the trials and you're like, well, the dogs are still here and they're doing well.
Yeah, that's it.
Yeah, pretty quickly. That's really interesting. And then why B cell as opposed to T cell? Is it because of that Hodgkin's connection? Or is it just narrowing it down and eliminating as many variables as possible? Or
Yes, yeah, just that I think the B cell is much more common generally than T cell. So
yeah.
Yes, I think it was more just trying to narrow the spread of investigation.
So if it's working relatively well in these trials, and these are early trials, so this is not yet available as a treatment, right, for the general population. But do you see, looking into the future in your crystal ball, do you see that possibly it could be of use in other cancer types?
I think the answer is yes, but the data is quite limited. Certainly,
sure.
I mean, there's a publication for a small-scale phase 1 study in people, which has been published on Monepantel, which is indicating positive outcomes in things like ovarian cancer and I think gastric cancer was another one.
Wow.
But in dogs, really the B-cell lymphoma really is the most significant data set that exists for Monepantel.
Well, lymphoma is the most common cancer type, and B-cell, as you pointed out, is more common than T-cell. So this would be a great thing. Now, one of the, often if someone decides they don't want to go through a standard, gold standard chemotherapy protocol, like the CHOP protocol for lymphoma, the next step down treatment option they're given is prednisone because it's relatively inexpensive. We know a lot about it. It's used. It's easily available. So how does prednisone and Monepantel, how do they match up to each other as options from what you know with this early data?
It's a really good question, that one, because ideally, if you think around, when a vet talks to the owner about prednisone, right, you're thinking of palliative care. You're thinking, let me just try and make the time as
give me a little extra time.
Yeah, that's right. And Monepantel itself, as I'm saying, is not going to be a competitor for the duration provided by chemotherapy, bearing in mind that most chemotherapy programs are 4 to 5, 6 months sometimes in duration. But the data that we've got from a Monepantel on its own versus nothing, it's clear that Monepantel does have a significant impact on reducing progression of disease. So what we're finding in those dogs that get through a study, Molly's 28 days.
Okay.
And again, that's set up for B-cell lymphoma. So we assess 3 times during the 28 days. So at day 28, we'll make a decision, and we're totally aligned to the standard VCOG RECIST criteria, which are, for your listeners, is really the globally accepted way of assessing outcomes of studies, right?
Right.
So what we find is that dogs that do well, and tumours are tumours, but the dogs that do well on Monepantel will remain in static disease at day 28. And that would be related really, we're thinking, to the entry point, the health of the dog at the start of the study.
So whatever the dog is at the beginning, they're still there 28 days later, they haven't gotten worse. And that's uncommon with lymphoma.
Yes.
Because you notice your dog has a lump under their jowl or in their armpit. You bring them in and you find out it's lymphoma. Sometimes it's a week later, they have lumps popping up all over the place. And it's really quite something. So it progresses very fast and is very serious. And that can cause all sorts of other problems that are related to having lumps all over your body that, hard to breathe, that it's hard to move. It's very painful for the dog. So having like one lump and then 28 days later, you're saying it would be like that same lump would probably still be there, but not be bigger and no other lumps would have appeared, for example.
Yes. So what generally happens is that dogs will present with multiple lymph nodes that are larger, right? So multiple lumps. Mm-hmm. And so the dogs that remain stable, then what we find is that the node measurements by the oncologist, they can be reduced because there is this grading between sort of minus 30 to plus 20% of node measurement. Okay. So if it sits within, if it reduces, say, 20% or it goes up 10%, that's called stable disease. So within the variations, we're finding those dogs are maintaining stability. But one thing that we have found, and this is on the website, so I can talk about it, is that a retrospective analysis of dogs that had ongoing treatment. So at day 28, what Pharmos says to the oncologist and the owner is that, well, if you're really happy with the way Monepantel's going and you want to continue with the study, they will happily support ongoing medication with Monepantel. And what oncologists did over the last couple of years is that, because Pharmos doesn't have any impact on the decisions, it's all between the oncologist and the owner. Okay. But some oncologists made a call to, okay, well, let's say a dog does get to progressive disease at day 28, but for all intents and purposes is behaving normally. And this is actually not too uncommon. Still with energy, eating well, but the nodes have grown a bit more and they're outside the criteria for causing stable disease. So some of those dogs will then go on to a combination of Monepantel with prednisone. Oh. And at varying dose rates. But what I think has been one of the most exciting findings is that the dogs that have been on the combination therapy Molly they've pushed out sort of 5 to 7 months. And again, this is a retrospective analysis of data, which really needs to be set up and assessed properly in a proper study. In a study. Mm-hmm. But as an interesting finding out of this early stage data, because there's some similarities actually with the way prednisone works and the way Monepantel work on the cancer cell. And I'm not sure of the mechanism at all, but the interesting finding is that potentially there's longevity of survival. We've had a number of dogs that have gone through sort of 6 to 7 months of good quality of life after their initial presentation to the study. And I think this is an area of real unmet need within therapies of lymphoma for dogs. So I think for Pharmos, this is something that they're really wanting to explore further with more investment and much bigger studies. Yes, because these smaller, how many dogs are in these studies? You said 34? 34 at this stage. 34. Yeah. So it's not nothing, but it's not hundreds of dogs. Or how many dogs would you like to see in a study? If the decision was to really, and we'd call this a phase 3, we would go, I'd like to see 100 dogs. 100 dogs, yeah. Yeah. That's a nice round number, and you can get good percentages. Yes, that's right. Understand. That's right. Yeah, do the maths. It's easy for me. It suits me quite well. I bet 1,000 would be nice too. That's another one. You can get good percentages. You have to do too much hard math. That's right. Well, that's a good place for us to stop just for a moment to listen to our sponsors for today's show. And then when we come back, Kim, I want to ask you about another dewormer that is being repurposed.
One might assume a newsletter about dog cancer is depressing and upsetting. Well, it doesn't have to be. In the hands of our editorial team, dog cancer news is oftentimes uplifting, inspiring, and sometimes even hilarious. That's because everyone here is a massive dog lover, just like you, and we never lose sight of our true audience, the dogs. They live in the moment and take every chance to play and snuggle and laugh that they can get. So we do too. Dog Cancer News comes in 3 times a week. It's free to subscribe, and to get it delivered to your inbox, just go to dogcancernews.com.
And we're back with Kim talking about Monepantel. What question I know is going to come up in the mind of the listener as they hear you speak about a sheep dewormer called Monepantel is that like Ivermectin? So please, is Monepantel Ivermectin, and what is the difference?
Yeah, so if you think around my term repurposing, then that term applies both to Ivermectin and Monepantel and some other chemistries, right? Ivermectin and Monepantel are totally different chemistries. They've got a very different mode of action as dewormers. And so from that sense, they are unrelated.
Okay.
From a related sense, it's obvious that Ivermectin also has been around for 30 or 40 years, and it has other things that it does to cells as the same way that Monepantel does. And honestly, one of the exciting things being a bit of a science geek is that chemistries can be around for decades, but people are still working out things that they do, right? This science doesn't stop.
Right.
So I think if there's a connection, it's just that they both actives do a lot of different things besides what they're initially commercialized for, and that's maybe one of the cool things about being a scientist.
I think my favorite repurposing is Viagra, which was mildly effective as a heart drug, but very effective as, let's say, a stimulant. I know it's not a stimulant, but I'm not quite sure how to say that on Dog Cancer Answers, which is a family-friendly show, and I think we should keep it that way.
Yes, well, I think if you think around serendipity, like there's another chemistry
so to speak.
Yeah, indeed. You know, yes. Oh, yes, my blood pressure's, yes, that's right. Anyway, but there's quite a few stories about how things are discovered. There was one parasiticide which I worked on for about 10 years, and the story there was a lot of these things are discovered in soil, right? I mean, that's a whole nother area of mine that I've got interest in. It's just naturally derived chemistries. And so ivermectin is obviously from a soil organism, and this other chemistry was as well. And the person who discovered it, if you like, was camping in the Caribbean, so the story went, and sat down next to a spot on the creek and realized there was not many mosquitoes or sandflies around here. And I guess this is some creative license, but apparently took some soil samples, went back to the lab and isolated out this particular organism, which produced this, it's one of the safest parasiticides. It's called spinosad, actually, which is a great one. So there is another story of just how things start.
Yeah. If you keep your mind open and curious, I think humans are natural scientists when they're relaxed and open-minded, right?
Let's never stop asking questions. I think that's the key thing.
I agree.
Yeah.
So talk a little bit about side effects and conflicts with it's being used in combination with prednisone. How does that affect the dosing of other drugs? Are there side effects to Monepantel when you take continually, because it's once a day rather than a short course like you would do for a dewormer in a sheep or cow? But talk a little bit about those things.
Yeah. When the first studies were started with Monepantel, what you tend to try and do is you tend to find a dose rate which you really think has every chance of working, because you want to assess it quite quickly. So the first dose rate that was started, there were two aspects which are quite different to the dose rate we use now. One is it was the highest dose rate that was used to give it a good effect, but also the delivery vehicle wasn't the tablet. It was certainly a precursor to the tablet. And there were some issues there with palatability for the first one.
Oh.
But it was really clear, though, to your question on adverse effects, that if Monepantel dose was too high, then what you see some impacts on the liver. And this relates to reducing feed intake. And so you do get some inappetence and some weight loss, which is obviously not preferred when you've got an oncology patient, right? So,
right, you don't want them to lose more weight.
Yes.
Yeah.
But we don't see gastric, we don't see diarrhea, we kind of don't see skin lesions. So that's really been the major thing that we've seen. But we're very mindful now about the impact of dose rate on the liver. That's really the target organ of change.
So do you monitor the liver values and then lower the dose if you see change?
Yes. So what we do now with the study, so we will do, to enroll the dog in the study, there's a full clinical examination. This involves blood tests, obviously. We image, we do radiographs of the chest, we ultrasound the abdomen, we type the tumour. So we get a really full picture at day 0. And then day 14, we will do a full blood test again. And then on day 28, we'll repeat everything, imaging, blood tests. So we've got a really good idea on liver enzyme values, kidney function, all the electrolytes. We know we've got some good information there. And certainly by moving to a different dose, and we've gone to a lower dose now, and so we have a dose regimen where we start with what we call a loading dose, which is a higher dose than we would maintain on. And the idea behind that is that, as I mentioned, Monepantel works through the energy system of the cell. So it takes a couple of days to initiate that effect. Like a cytotoxic drug will come straight in, and if that cell is dividing and it's at the level, then it will start killing the cell.
Right.
Monepantel is a slower uptake.
Okay.
So we have moved to an initial high dose to start with, and then we're probably looking, again without too much detail, probably looking at between a 5 and a 10-fold reduction of the first dose where we found the liver issue, right? And so we've dropped the dose quite significantly for the last part of the study.
And that is resulting in stabilization of the cancer progression, as far as you can tell from your results so far. That hitting it hard and fast at the high dose and then dropping it way down for maintenance through those 28 days is working out.
Yes, and we keep a close eye on, so we take blood levels for assessing levels of the Monepantel in the blood.
Okay.
So we now believe we've got a much clearer idea of the plasma levels that we need to achieve stability with the lymphoma. So we're matching, that's really been the work that we've done, is to try and match outcome with dose with plasma levels of the Monepantel.
I see. And then in your larger trials, you can take what you've learned here and really look at that in a more detailed way with a larger set of dogs.
Yes.
Are you focusing on certain breeds or size of dogs, or are you just looking at the naive treatment B-cell lymphoma dogs?
Yes. Yeah. Look, we've not selected on anything in terms of breed, size, shape, size. Really is related to, at the moment, we've got a minimum of 11 kilos, say 20 pounds, but that really relates to the tablet size that the company's got. It's just a bit difficult to, so it's not a toxicity thing, it's more just we don't quite have a tablet size that fits small dogs.
Right. If you make it commercially, you'll make it though, I imagine.
Yes, well, again, that'll be someone else's decision, Molly, but that would make sense to me. Yeah.
Oh, well, I have small dogs, so that's what I'm interested in.
I hear you.
So tell me a little bit about how this works, where this is not a drug that's approved in the U.S. as a U.S.-based show. I'm interested in, because you have a trial center here in the U.S. How does that work to use a drug that we don't have on our shores?
Yes. There's a facility, and we work with actually a good friend of mine who's a US regulatory person in the US, and there is an ability to, before you submit your INAD, which we would have to do a larger scale study, and we would have to have a lot more data available. You can look at a 10-dog study. So we've got a very small pilot study that we're running in Texas, and that's really just to let us, again, get some connections with oncologists in the US, but to have some local data which we would submit alongside everything else that we needed to do the INAD submission, which hopefully if enrollment rates pick up, and it's a bit of a plug for the study to your readers that enrollment rates.
Oh, we're happy to do that.
Yeah.
Anybody who wants to get involved in these trials, they sound like they're well worth it.
Please.
I imagine anybody in Australia could ask their vet to get enrolled. Is that how this works?
Yeah, look, so there are certain sites that we've got lined up for the study. Probably if owners wanted to, they could just go onto the Pharmost website.
Okay. We'll put a link in the show notes for them.
Yes, and there would be media.
Yeah.
You can see where the sites are run. Obviously, my details, or Dr. Roger Aston, who's chairman of the board. I'm very happy to take calls. And then if there's any interest, in fact, I was speaking to an owner from New Zealand the other day who just heard about the study in New Zealand, and so I chatted to her for half an hour about their pet and options, and so very happy to do that as well.
Okay. Well, that's really nice. So you have sort of your hands-on company. So you have trial sites in Australia, New Zealand, and one in the US. Is there anywhere else?
No.
Do you want to be somewhere else?
Look, I think you hit it a little bit to say, look, we're quite a small company, and like I'm the lead investigator, so you don't want to spread too wide.
Yeah.
You want to keep focused in areas, and so at the moment, I'm really comfortable with the sites that we've got.
It's manageable.
Yes, it is.
So if someone's listening and they think, okay, my dog's just been diagnosed with B-cell lymphoma, I haven't made a choice yet, how do they know their dog is right for this trial? How would you assess that? Who should be enrolling?
Yeah, so the obvious place is to start having a chat with your own veterinarian, right? And if they have not heard of the study, then feel free to reach out directly to Pharmost, or we can direct to the oncologist. But the initial examination really is the key. So if your pet has just been diagnosed, seemingly quite normal, energy's the same, appetite's the same, that would be very likely to be substage A. So we really, if there's an area that we're limiting, is enrolling substage B dogs is not something that we've done. So every dog that we've had, they could be stage 5. So we're taking any stage through to stage 5. But substage B is a group that we're not enrolling, because generally those dogs, sadly, are just too ill to manage.
They're very ill.
Yes.
When they're substage B, that's when they're
Yes.
really, really, yeah, I understand. So in the interest of kindness to the dog,
Yes.
you take the dogs who are in pretty good shape, have lymphoma, it's an urgent situation, but they're still doing pretty well, hoping that you can keep that quality of life stable.
Yes. And one of the things the oncologists, as we've talked around, find it difficult is that, you have a 28-day study. It doesn't sound long, but as you've pointed out a couple of times, Molly, for a lymphoma dog, it can be really challenging. So we really like substage A1, as you say, to try and be fair to and look after the welfare of the dog as best we can, given we're moving into a study situation. But then again, if we have ill dogs and unfortunately they pass away in a week or 2 weeks, then that's not an effective outcome for anyone either. So, yeah.
Right. And that would leave, for me, a bad taste in my mouth.
Yes.
Potentially as a dog lover, to think it didn't do anything for my dog and I had hope. And that seems like a kindness for everybody, because emotions run so high around cancer. It's just heartbreaking, isn't it? It's heartbreaking for veterinarians as much as it is for the dog lover.
Yeah. And it's quite emotional at times when you see the thinking owners go through about how to manage their pet with cancer, right? And often, well, I say often, I have observed owners who will make decisions to look after their pet in a kinder way. Maybe that's a different phrase for people, but they might put themselves through more aggressive therapy than they would actually allow their pet to go through because they're responsible, right, for the outcome. So the initial chat and the investigation and the discussion with the oncologist and the owner that's really where it all has to happen. This is where the key decisions are made and expectations. It's really important that, and I know categorically oncologists are really open about what they think about the study. They don't want to create false hope. They want to create good expectations. So I'm really proud to work with these oncologists because they always have the animal welfare top of mind. Because people need to know the ranking, obviously, of the therapies, right? So gold standard, chemotherapy. That's it. Palliative therapy. And then we're thinking that this option could be something in the middle, which provides a different opportunity, but it's still a study. It's still an early stage investigation study. So
yeah, we're not there yet. It's not a treatment yet, but it's possibly a peek into the future.
Indeed, hopefully. Yep.
Yes. Well, Kim, thank you so much for joining us today. I really appreciate it.
It's been great to be here, Molly. Enjoyed the chat and good luck to everyone listening.
And thank you, listener. I am really excited about Monepantel, in part because sometimes the old drugs that we know for one use really do have potential in other areas. And it takes scientists like Kim to go and find those uses and put in the time and effort it takes to build the trials and do the science that we need to do in order to know for sure whether something that is currently being used in one application could be used in another. Obviously, Monepantel's in studies now. It's early days yet, and hopefully things will continue to show promise. At some point, there might be an option for those who decline chemotherapy for whatever reason, that they could be using a substance like Monepantel with or without prednisone and experience few side effects and possibly put lymphoma in stasis for a few more months so they get more time with their beloved dog. In order to keep up to date on the latest news from dog cancer world, please subscribe to our newsletter, Dog Cancer News. You can do that at dogcancernews.com. Thanks again for joining us today. I'm Molly Jacobson, and from all of us here at Dog Podcast Network, I'm wishing you and your dog a warm aloha.
Thank you for listening to Dog Cancer Answers. If you'd like to connect, please visit our website at dogcancer.com or call our listener line at 808-868-3200. And here's a friendly reminder that you probably already know. This podcast is provided for informational and educational purposes only. It's not meant to take the place of the advice you receive from your dog's veterinarian. Only veterinarians who examine your dog can give you veterinary advice or diagnose your dog's medical condition. Your reliance on the information you hear on this podcast is solely at your own risk. If your dog has a specific health problem, contact your veterinarian. Also, please keep in mind that veterinary information can change rapidly. Therefore, some information may be out of date. Dog Cancer Answers is a presentation of Maui Media in association with Dog Podcast Network.